Welcome to another video on JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and in today's video I'm going to do a quick character guide on Kakyoin, going through all of his skills and some of my first impression on whether I think he's a good character or not, and also what kind of situation do I think he's more suitable for, etc. Now, before getting into all of that, I do actually want to show you guys his summoning animation first, because I actually found it absolutely hilarious how this game actually done his intro animation when you first get him. Now, it's not actually the animation itself that you want to watch out for, but I want you guys to turn up the volume to actually listen to the soundtrack or the music that's playing when he's actually introduced. And if you're a big fan of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, you would then know it's from his infamous cherry eating scene, which is absolutely hilarious. So yeah, I'm just going to play the soundtrack now with the animation from my previous summoning video, and yeah, just really look out for it. You guys all know where that is coming from, but in case you don't, I'm just gonna play the original anime where this happened, and yeah, just absolutely hilarious how they decided to bring this as the intro animation for when you actually summon for him. I don't know what you guys thought of that, but I just found it absolutely hilarious, the fact that they actually decided to make this as the summoning animation for Kakyoin. And also to some extent, I also find it to be like a really nice bit of attention to detail the game developer is actually paying to the target audience of the series as well, because the very different funny memes, to be honest, is a huge part of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and the fact the game developer actually recognizes and actually decided to make that as part of the summoning animation, etc. It just kind of shows they're actually paying that bit of extra attention. So massive kudos to the game developer for having that creativity of making this as part of the summoning animation. But yeah, so that all jokes aside, let's talk about the actual kit for Kakyoin, and some of my thoughts on whether this character is actually any good or not. Now, obviously there are very different skills, which because the game is in Chinese, you can obviously use X7 game platforms built-in translation to actually translate them to see what they are. In case you don't know about this, I would post the download link for this game via X7 platform in the video description below. But basically, X7 game does provide this built-in translation functionality, which is one reason why I prefer to play a lot of the Chinese server games on this platform. But with all kind of translation, sometimes it can be a bit patchy and you may not actually understand what's going on. So it's actually probably going to be easier for me to actually tell you guys rather than you guys relying on the translation. So basically, all characters in this game have 4 different skills. The last one is Awakening skill, which you can only basically activate it once you actually dupe the character. So you won't be able to unlock it straight away. So the first skill you have for Kakyoin, which is just the normal skill, I want to say, it's automatically released. So remember, in this game, you'll be automatically doing your normal skills. It's only the ultimate skill you don't actually have the choice of actually when to release it, etc. once it's charged up. Now, the normal skill is just very straightforward, hitting the enemy front row. It's going to hit 3 times, at base level, it's just going to be 117%, and then eventually it get increased to 270%. And the main takeaway here is that well, it's just the enemy front row, so it's not an AoE attack, okay? So that's basically the main thing I have to take away here. Now, then the second skill is basically his ultimate skill. So this is the one that you can only release when his ultimate gauge is charged up. Now, this one, the damage looks really low if you just take a look at the red numbers, but this is actually going to hit 5 times. So if you actually compare this to other attackers, for example, the vampire version of Dio, well, you realize that the vampire version of Dio does an AoE attack, which is to one times of 750, whereas Kakyoin does it 5 times over 122. So it's still not as high as some of the other DPS, but don't think of the damage as just 122. It's actually 5 times whatever this red number is. So it's actually going to be a lot higher than what it may first seem like. And this is also an AoE attack as well, which is quite nice. I definitely think AoE attack is quite nice in this game. The other thing which is also very nice is that it does have this interruption effect, and basically once again, because you would be choosing when to use your actual ultimate attack in this game. So basically, you have that choice. If you don't put it on auto mode, having this interruption ability can actually come in clutch in certain situations. So this is another part which I really like. And the other thing which I also find it really, really nice about this is that from level 3 onwards, what you're going to see is there's this additional effect, which is basically you're going to have, at the highest level, you're going to have a 90% chance of randomly stealing one of the enemy buff to yourself. And that is actually really nice because obviously you are removing the buff from the enemy, but also you are giving that buff to yourself. And this is also somewhat unique to Kakyoin, because if you actually take a look at another DPS, straight up DPS like deal, what you realize is that it's always just going to be a straight up damage increase. It doesn't have any additional effect. Whereas Kakyoin kind of have this a hybrid version of DPS and also support utility in him, which I personally find it to be quite nice. Now, then we have his third skill, which is his trigger skill. And basically, this is basically saying that you would be getting extra crit damage based on the amount of debuff the enemy have. So basically, for every debuff they have at base level, you're going to get 12% extra crit damage. At the highest level, you're going to get an extra 120% increase, which is absolutely, ridiculous how high it is. And it's also per debuff as well. So let's say if the enemy have 3 debuff, it's actually going to be 360. So it kind of actually turns out to be a really, really high amount of damage. And to some extent, there's also like the ceiling for Kakyoin is actually going to be very, very high, depending on how much debuff the enemy actually have. And that's kind of why, even though Kakyoin may not be a straight up damage dealer to comparison to some of other pure DPS, because of the very different ability, support ability have, and also this fact that you can increase your crit damage, it can actually deal a nice decent amount of damage, even though the base value is somewhat low in comparison. Okay, and then lastly we have this awakening ability, which once again is relating to crit, but basically this one is that every single time when you crit, you're gonna increase the enemy cooldown, and this is absolutely massive. Now at the highest level, you're able to give a 12% enemy cooldown to increase of enemy skill cooldown, which is absolutely amazing. And it's amazing because in this game, at least from what I found, the battles don't tend to be that long. Like almost like you're able to kill off an enemy in like 3 or 4 attacks, at least early on in the battle. It doesn't seem like there's too much like damage mitigation or reduction ability. Or maybe I just haven't been able to use them successfully so far. And if those kind of cases where you're able to kill off the enemy fairly quickly, the fact that you're actually able to slow down the enemy and make sure you attack before the enemy is going to be a massive game changer, because you could actually kill off the enemy before they have the chance to do high amount of damage back to you. So that's kind of why I found this to be particularly useful in PvP scenarios where you are actually able to get that head start over the enemies, etc. Now, in terms of the build guide for Kakyoin, like for example, what card you want to play on him, etc., you can kind of already tell based on both his trigger ability and also his awakening ability. It's all to do with crit. So any ability or any cards that you are able to increase your own critical rate probability, those are going to be the best suited ones on Kakyoin. So that should be what you want to predominantly prioritize for. And then in terms of my initial thoughts on Kakyoin, obviously I'm still very new to this game, so take this with a pinch of salt. This is just kind of my initial thought based on his skills and also my experience with other gacha games. But for me, Kakyoin seems to be much more of a PvP character rather than PvE character, because of the fact that you are able to do a lot of his like half of his kit is to do with like crit, and normally what happens in like PvE, enemy tend to have like higher crit resistance as you battle the harder stages. So I do find that generally it's going to be harder and harder for you to land critical hits in PvE, especially the more difficult stages, and that basically is going to cripple half of Kakyoin's kit. So I personally think like from that perspective, Kakyoin may not be the best suited character for PvE game modes. However, for PvP, I do feel like could be very, very strong, probably one of the stronger character in this game from PvP perspective, of the fact that you're able to get a head start on the enemies, and also the fact that you're able to turn debuff into actual pure critical damage as well, so that you are actually able to basically have a very, very high ceiling in terms of how much damage you can actually do with Kakyoin as a whole.